just because there's been a crackdown on reporting regarding the Mediterranean African Young Team on their Kali Young Team sister club. I can't help but get the feeling the people who punt this shit do think we're stupid. You know, why bother? I mean, they don't even try anymore. It's near enough a copy and paste routine. Just edit a couple of details here and there. Have not stopped a surge of migrants risking their lives trying to cross to the UK in dangerous inflatable boats. So in other words, more illegal migrants have been given dinghies from somebody who in turn began to cross the channel illegally, aiming to pass the halfway point before holding out for a border force boat to spot them. And of course the smugglers will be blamed, there's no question about it. And there's no questions also asked as to where these people obtain these dinghies from. Perplexes me how they manage to do all of this and they never seem to get caught. Same routine as usual, I suppose. You know, so more have been intercepted by border force patrols as they attempted the treacherous journey this week. With many more possibly slipping through. So again, the misleading use of the word interception, suggesting that the people are stopped and prevented from proceeding any further, when in truth, the minute they step over the halfway mark into British territory, they are transported here personally. Not once are they sent back, and if they are, we never hear about it. No, in fact, it seems that these people get processed and their journey is complete, with many possibly slipping through the cracks, or slipping through, whatever. Meaning the labels, of course, that these people are given by the wankers at the UN and their NGO soy boys are even more disingenuous than first thoughts. How many times have we heard the embarrassing take that people are vulnerable and they fled war, where's the humanity, blah blah blah. These so-called refugees, seeking a better life and fleeing war and persecution, are quite prepared to disappear into the dead of night if they manage to approach the English shoreline and they still currently remain undetected at the time. Surely they would stick around and wait to apply for asylum, no? Migrants wearing face masks, apparently as an attempt to guard against coronavirus, were reportedly seen at the port of Dover in Kent. Bella Sankey from Detention Action called for migrants to be given safe accommodation instead of indefinite detention, and the means to self-isolate if they need to. There is no so-called humanitarian laws that obligate any country out there to accommodate migrants, which is exactly what these people are. They're not refugees. They're simply exploiting the rules that are in place for hypothetical refugees. Everybody knows this, including the government. And providing safe accommodation for these illegal migrants not only rewards them for what they've just done, but also encourages others to do the same thing. It's not rocket science, and the fact that common sense is nowhere to be seen in regards to this debate should tell you all you need to know. So anyway, fears were raised about 3,000 migrants living in North France in desperate conditions who were at high risk of contracting the coronavirus. Care for Cali founder Claire Mosley said it was only a matter of time before the virus swept through the migrant camps. Well, that is France's problem, and if they're not going to apply for asylum in France, then they should have been deported long ago. You know, I'm fucking sick of these people trying to appeal to the public for sympathy. Calais and Dunkirk, to name a few, are full to the brim of mainly African men who have been there for years, might I add, along with a multitude of individuals from several Islamic countries, and that's without having to include Syrians. None of them should be there bar Syrians, theoretically, and the more that eventually find their way here just sends the message to others that they also need to bide their time, and sure enough, they'll find their way here too. Migrants intercepted in the Channel and brought to the UK are being closely monitored for symptoms of coronavirus, the Home Office said. Well, that's great to know. But guess what they're not doing? Guess what they didn't say? What's going to happen to them after they're finished being monitored? I wonder what that might be. I'll tell you what it won't be. Being returned to where they came from. That seems to be taboo in this day and age. Standard. On Monday, the French authorities intercepted 16 migrants 5 nautical miles off Dunkirk after being contacted by a ferry about 8:30. The next day, around 4:30 a.m, the border force rescued, quote-unquote, 16 migrants and took them to Dover, 16 men. A rescue sounds as if they were in danger. They were simply spotted and then transported accordingly. No rescuing involved, no peril that they were safe from, nothing of the sort. Just a farce. A taxi service, effectively. An aquatic Uber service by the very same people who are supposedly paid to prevent this kind of thing from occurring. It's kind of in the name, is it not? Border Force. Also on Tuesday, at about 8:30 in the morning, 9 migrants were found in inflatable boats and taken ashore to Dover. Oh, they were found. They were taken ashore. That's good to know. Were they given a kiss and a cuddle? 2 when they got there. Welcome to your new home, Abdul. Fucking joke, man. On Thursday, in the first of 5 incidents, 5, eventful, French authorities intercepted 16 migrants 5.5 nautical miles north of Calais. And where the fuck are these people obtaining these boats from? Seriously, why is nobody asking these questions? Because sometimes you don't need groundbreaking evidence to blow a narrative out the water. Sometimes a bit of common sense is all it takes. Where are these people obtaining these boats from? How are these so-called smugglers managing to sneak past all the necessary authorities and provide boats to these people who then in turn traverse the English Channel? Where are they being stored? Rather strange, don't you think? At 7 in the morning, UK authorities were alerted to an inflatable boat on a beach at the War in Folkestone with 5 life jackets being found with no migrants to be located. Oh, the vulnerable, desperate, poor little refugees couldn't even wait about to apply legally for asylum, albeit they're already illegal. But at 9:30, the border force picked up a boat outside the port of Dover, which had 15 migrants aboard who said they were Iranian nationals. They were picked up. That's good to know. They were picked up. They were rescued. They were intercepted. And of course, they weren't taken back to where they came from. Oh no, they were taken to Dover. That's good to know. I'll sleep easier tonight. And I couldn't give a shit where they claim they come from. What part of Syria is Iran? Where in Syria is Somalia? Where in Syria is Senegal? Whereabout is Pakistan and Sudan? Which Syrian province exactly are we talking about here? Also at 9:30, another boat carrying 24, including 7 children, was intercepted. Intercepted, of course, meaning they were taken here. The migrants presented themselves as Iranian and Iraqi. When we got their word for it, though, they presented themselves. Interesting turn of phrase there. And were taken ashore in the UK. So we've got 7 children this time round. Well, that's okay then. We better let them in because they've got children with them. If they cared so much about the well-being of their children, of course, they'd have applied for asylum in one of the multiple countries that they traversed in order to get to where they got to. No? Is that too much like common sense? Maybe they weren't thinking straight because they're so desperate and vulnerable. Not to mention, on a separate note, the fact that the mention of children has only come up once in the duration of this description of the dinghy brigades stands to reason that the majority of them, if not all of them, up until this point, were all men. And at 5 p.m, the French authorities intercepted 12 migrants, including 7 children, and took them to a French port. If these people aren't applying for asylum in France, what the fuck is the point in just keeping an eye on them and intervening, supposedly, whenever they decide to jump on a boat and head for England? In total, 108 migrants are known to have been intercepted, being the operative word, of course, by the UK and French authorities, with 64 of those being taken to the UK. And that 64, in theory, gives the supposed smuggler's reputation a wee bit of a boost, does it not? Talk about aiding and abetting. All they need to do now is provide a boat. Which part of that narrative involves them actually participating in any smuggling of any sorts? All I seem to see is the government slowly emptying Calais week after week after week, whilst they fob us off with this piss poor performance of pretending to be hungry. And it wouldn't be complete, of course, without finishing it all off with a message or two from a prick from a charity who's devoid of any self-awareness. Bella Sankey, a director of the charity Detention Action, said the desperation of those making death-defying crossings during a global pandemic is self-evident. It's hardly death-defying when they're all at it. But seriously, namby-pamby bollocks aside, why aren't you aiming your embarrassing guilt trips at France? They're in France, and yet you don't seem to mind them piling up and spending months, if not years, in inhumane conditions, being vulnerable and desperate. So desperate, so sad, and being ignored. And despite all of that, there's no intervention from the French authorities. But the second they begin traversing the channel, only to either be intercepted by French authorities or transported to England by our own, you come out with the heartfelt guilt trips. Why is that? We get the violins from Big Bella. Selective outrage really taints your fakery. If Turkey can keep so-called asylum seekers for years without granting them asylum, then why is it up to the European Union to grant them asylum after the fact? It's a rhetorical question, but it can be applied here too. What a fucking joke this shit show is. An absolute joke. And she added that following the Windrush report, the Home Secretary says she wants to put fairness, dignity, respect at the heart of the Home Office's mission and put people before process. Well, that is riveting stuff. What a shock that truly is. So the totally separate and irrelevant conclusion from the Windrush report has somehow been tied in to what's going on here. Doesn't take a genius to conclude what they're probably referring to in regards to that. If this is true, those seeking sanctuary here will be provided with safe accommodation instead of indefinite detention and given the means to self-isolate if that is necessary. Well, considering the fact the government has been letting them all in since December 2018 anyway, I would probably consider the approach to date this far, from the perspective of the migrants anyway, as relatively fair and whatnot. So realistically, the only possible thing I can think of that could change from here is them scrapping the I'm really angry routine. Perhaps removing the halfway point and simply transporting them from A to B themselves. I don't know. But we can all rest easier tonight, knowing that the illegal collie squatters will be treated with fairness, dignity, and respect.